Hi, and welcome to Chapter 25, Learning Objective 1. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. We're going to talk about unemployment rate today. So this is our first objective, analyze the presence of unemployment in an economy. All right, so what I did was I pulled up the unemployment rate, the national unemployment rate from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is seasonally adjusted and includes everyone 16 years and over, and this is a percent change. So we had relatively low unemployment until COVID, and now it's shooting up, and I think our latest statistic is 13.3, so it's down from April. But if you take a look down here at the bottom, let's see if I can do this. Down here at the bottom, you're going to see, sure you're right, you're going to see, nope, sorry, there we are. Okay, what you're going to see is a lot of changes due to COVID. And I think that makes sense, especially when we think about going from 4.4 in April 2020 to April 2020, 14.7. So that's kind of incredible. And the underlying report you can read right here, which talks about Nevada being the highest unemployment rate during the last report. Now, we get the unemployment report monthly from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So what exactly does it include? Well, unemployment are those individuals that are seeking jobs, okay? And we're going to take a look at how we actually calculate this. Discouraged workers are not seeking a job. And so we're going to see, how do we come up with this 13.3%? So unemployment usually ends with the job seeker finding a job, and it may be hard to try and find a job. For example, during Corona, it was extremely hard to do that, and they want to qualify for unemployment. One of the things that we see is a little bit of a moral hazard, because as they talked about during COVID, that individuals were making more on unemployment than they were making on their jobs. So what would happen is that the individual didn't really want to return to the labor force because they were making more money on unemployment, and we would call that a moral hazard. There are different types of unemployment measures. So here's all the ones, table 2 in your book, U1, okay, all the way to U6. And when we take a look at the unemployment rate of 13.3, that is the U5 unemployment rate, okay? So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they differentiate. There's some terms here that we should know. So a marginally attached worker are neither working nor looking for a job, but indicate that they want to get a job, and they're available for a job. And they've worked in the recent past, and that's usually within the last 90 days. Okay, so that's marginally attached. We have some new things. Discouraged workers not currently looking for a job or are not available. And it's usually individuals who have given work. Sometimes people will be employed part-time. They really want a full-time job, but they're willing to settle for a part-time. And that might be the case with some of the individuals watching this. So how long are the unemployed without work? Most unemployment periods are relatively short. Okay, most unemployment observed at any given time tends to be long-term. So what does that mean? It means individually, it tends to be short. But when we take a look at unemployment as a whole, then there is some long-term unemployment. Most people in their lifetime will become unemployed. But that's the reason, because people change careers, not jobs, at least 3 times during their lifetime. And that might be, going from working in a career in retail while you're in school, to your chosen profession, to maybe a part-time career or something in retirement. But this is relatively short, okay? And these individuals can find a job if they want to. Okay, so this is how we reconcile those two statements right here. And again, most of the unemployment problem is attributable to few workers who are jobless for a long time. Most people are not jobless for a long time. When we talk about a long time, we mean greater than that 90-day period. Okay, so how do we define employed? Employed is going to be anyone who is 16 years or over, okay, that they are a paid employee and they have worked. They might work in their family business, or they might be an unpaid worker in their family's business. Okay, so they could own their own business as long as, or a paid employee, and they work unpaid in their family business. So we have full and part-time workers that we would count as employed. Unemployed are those who are not employed, but who are trying to be employed. So you have to actively look for a job within the last 30 days here. And those who are laid off. So that's what we saw during the coronavirus, was a lot of individuals there. And then we have a third category. So how do we come up with the unemployment rate? We start with employed. We have a second category called unemployed. And our third category is not in the labor force. So these individuals might be retirees, disabled, incarcerated, the idle rich, and we're also going to put in here, and you'll see full-time students is there. Also, we're going to put in here discouraged workers. And so those are individuals that have just kind of given up on the job market. Okay. So this is how the three categories played out in January 2019. So employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force. Now, this is how we reconcile this. So when we're talking about calculating the unemployment rate, first we want to know that we take the adult population here, and that's the number of people employed plus the number of people unemployed plus the number of people not in the labor force. Again, greater than 16 years of age. The employed, we just talked about what fits into that category. The unemployed, again, actively looking for work. And then that category not in the labor force, full-time students, incarcerated, active military, and so on. And over here, we have the labor force. And the labor force is made up of, okay, let me get it. There we are. The labor force is equal to the number of people employed plus the number of people unemployed. So these two categories make up the labor force, and the adult population includes the labor force plus not in the labor force. So let's do this. There we go. Okay. Now, sometimes the unemployment rate, and as I said, nationally, it's 13.3%, up substantially. In which of the following, what happens to the unemployment rate, and does that give you an accurate impression of what's happening in the market? Sue lost her job and begins looking for a new one. So I like to think of this as, think about the categories, right? So there are three categories. There are employed, there are unemployed, and there is the third category of not in the labor force. Okay. Now, again, the employed plus the unemployed, they make up the labor force. Yes, the labor force. Okay, so let's look at what would happen to the unemployment rate. Well, I haven't really told you how to compute it yet, have I? So the unemployment rate that we're going to calculate is going to equal the number of people unemployed divided by the labor force. Doing that first, and then times 100 expressed as a percent. So let's look at our first scenario here and see what happens when Sue changes categories. So Sue was employed, right? Let's see if I can find my pen. There we go. Okay, so Sue was employed. So she started here and she moved to unemployed. What would happen to the unemployment rate? And then A, the unemployment rate would increase. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because she's unemployed at the present time. Okay, let's look at our next statement. John, a steel worker who's been out of work since his mill closed last year, becomes discouraged and gives up looking for work. So think about those three categories. So John was unemployed, right? So he was counted in the unemployment rate, but then he moves to a discouraged worker or not in the labor force. And when he does that, when John gives up looking for work, this is what's interesting, is the unemployment rate is going to go down. And why does it go down? Because he moved from being unemployed, which is counted in the unemployment rate, to not in the labor force, which is not counted. Remember, the unemployment rate are the number of people unemployed divided by the labor force. So this one kind of goes, this is weird, right? The unemployment rate could go down, but actually that could be a bad thing. Okay. Sam, the sole earner in his family of five, just lost his $80,000 job as a research scientist. He immediately takes a job at McDonald's till he can find a new one. So Sam, where does he start? He starts in the employed category as a scientist. Okay. Then he moves to the employed category. So he stays in the same category and now he works at McDonald's. Okay. So this one, the unemployment rate is going to be unchanged. But we call this the idea of underemployment, meaning that you're more qualified than the jobs that you will take. Okay. All right, so the unemployment rate increases, and again, that kind of makes sense to us with Sue. John, the unemployment rate goes down, okay, because he's not being counted as unemployed because he gave up looking for work. Doesn't really give an accurate impression, I would agree. And then Sam, unemployment rate unchanged. So this is the end of our little introduction to the unemployment rate. So we now know that the national unemployment rate 13.3%, but it is down from the 14-ish percent that we had earlier. The Bureau of Labor Statistics collects this information on a monthly basis and reports it. They just did it. The report I showed you was for June 22nd of 2020. And then we take a look at how exactly are the categories defined, okay? And so the unemployment rate could go down, but that necessarily doesn't mean that that's a good thing. I'll see you next time in Objective 2 when we'll work with this more mathematically. Thanks.